Okay, we are doing a tutorial. This is topic 4.1. I actually taught this in class yesterday, but I'm going to create a video and add it to the website here just because there are a few things I think people might need to kind of be reminded of. So this will be just a recap video, and maybe in future your students will use it to learn this tutorial. Okay, we are learning about X position, Y position, and rotation. These are properties that we can set dynamically. We're going to do that using Flash, using code. We're also going to take that code and we're going to apply it to a button. We're going to put it on a button so that the button will change the properties we're talking about. Once we've done that, we figured out how to do that. We'll be using a function to do that. Once we've done that, then you'll be learning how to make Flash its innate timeline window so that it can continually refresh. Okay, let's take a look here. Create a new file. Alright, so the first thing I do is set up my layers. I need 3 layers. One is going to be called graphics. One is going to be called button, and one is going to be called actions. Actions. Let's try that again. Great. I am going to create an orange box. Here's my orange box. I'm going to double click it and I'm going to turn it into a symbol. Okay, the symbol is going to be a movie clip. It's going to be called orange box, and I'm going to purposely set, so eventually what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this thing, and I want it to rotate around the center, but I'm purposely going to do this incorrectly so we can see what's happening. Okay, I'm going to set it off like that. Okay, and I'm going to go to my library. Okay, here's our orange box. I'm going to put 2 more copies of the same thing right here. Now, I said that what we want to do here is we want to change the properties of this box. Well, how do I do that? These are all called orange box. They're all the same item. So if I did something here, or I want Flash to do something to change this one, or this one, or this one, how do I tell Flash? Well, under your Properties tab, when you've got an item selected that's a movie clip or a button, there's something called an instance name. Now, an instance name is like a name, an identifier. Okay, so if I've got 30 students in my class, I don't call them student, I call them by their first name. So Bill or Bob or Lisa or Mary or whatever. Okay, so this is the identifier. So if I want to call this square box something, I can call it SQ1. I can call it anything. I can call it Bob if I want, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. You want things to be named after what they are. So I'm going to call it SQ1. I could type out, if I wanted to, orange box 1, whatever. It doesn't matter what you name it, as long as you're consistent. So I'm going to go with SQ1. Now you can guess what this is going to be. SQ2 and SQ3. Great. Every time I click on one, you see the instance name or the identifier changes according to the one that I've got selected. Okay. The next thing I need is I need a button, so I'm going to create a green button right here. Okay, I'm going to turn it into a button. I'm going to convert to symbol, select button from the drop down. I'm going to call it green button. Okay, now you'll notice that this was called, in the library, this was called orange box, and this is called green button. These are just the name of the library item. So I can have as many buttons as I want. I can have 100 of them if I wanted to, and I can have 100 of these boxes. But the key here is instance names, right? These have no instance name, so I can't tell Flash dynamically to do something. Dynamically meaning using code. I can't say, hey Flash, use this button to do something, because I haven't set an identifier. I need to. Okay, it needs a name. So I have to call this. I can call it anything I want. I'm going to call it green button. Okay, and in fact, I'm going to call it green button 1 because I'm going to have some other green buttons. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste the name and change it to button 2. And I'm going to change this guy, green button 3. Now each of these has its own identifiers, and I can identify them individually. Same with these, I can target these individually. Okay, super duper. Now, these all need to be put on the right layer, so I'm going to grab this, I'm going to go edit, cut, and I put this on my buttons layer, edit, paste in place. And I'm going to go this one, and this one, and this one. I'm going to go edit, cut, and I'm going to put them on the graphics layer, edit, paste in place. Okay, so that is all hopefully looking good. Now, we're not going to do much with these buttons yet, but what I will do is I'll double click in here, and I'm going to add F6 here, and I'm going to change the overstate to like a bright green, so that when I test it, my button has an overstate. Okay, now notice that this is the same library item. So when I edited one, I changed the library item, but they still have their own unique identifiers. Even though, excuse me, even though I changed, I changed the overstate for this guy. Okay, this is the same item here. Okay, so this and this and this are the same library item. So when I changed that one, it did the same thing here. And I can go function F6 here. I can change this to have a downstate, which is going to be red. And when I test it, it's going to update all of them because these are all the same library item. They just have different identifiers. They have different instance names. Okay, good. All right, let's go back to our lesson. Now I don't need this for now, so I'm going to put it down here. We will need it in a minute. But first, we're just going to talk about changing the properties of this thing. Go to my actions layer here. I'm going to open up my actions frame, which is this. I'm going to zoom out on my stage just so we can see. Excuse me. Great. Okay, I need to make some changes to the properties of this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first click on it, go to the properties, and I'm going to set the X to 0 and the Y to 0 so that it's up in the top corner. Now I set the registration point to the top left corner. If you remember, when I created the symbol, I made this the top left corner. So 0 and 0 are referring to this point, right? If I had made my square, if I did this, if I did this, and when I turned it into a symbol, if I set it to the center, I'll just call this big red, and we'll make a movie clip. Okay, notice if I set this to 0, 0, 0, 0, notice that the registration point is in the center for this. So that, the registration point that I set a second ago, means this is the point that it's referring to when I set that to 0, 0. If I make this 100 and 100, this center point is at 100. So this guy here, when I do the same thing, okay, I make that 100 and 100, it's going to align it based on this point, okay, that point right there. Okay, that's an important distinction. I can get rid of that, and I can probably get rid of big red. I don't need big red anymore. Goodbye, big red. Okay, so set this back. Properties 0 tab 0. Oops, 0 and 0. All right, that's up here in the corner. So I want to do some things. I want Flash to change the position of this thing. So you remember I said that this has got an identifier, square 1. Well, I'm going to copy this, okay? And then I'm going to go to my actions layer here, and I'm going to paste that name, square.1. And you'll see that Flash says, hey, you just added some actions into the current slash, or into this frame, scene 1. Okay, I just added some actions. And you'll see here, it's got a little A. That means you put an action, or a piece of code, on this layer at frame 1. Okay, and that's what's here. Scene 1, frame 1. Okay, now I want to say, hey, Flash, pay attention to this thing. I'm talking about this guy right here, square 1. I want you to change a property. So the property I want is .x, and what you'll see here is this part, .x, turns blue because Flash goes, oh, .x, I know what that is. That is the horizontal position, the X position, right? Remember when I clicked on this and we've got an X and Y position, right? Flash knows that this thing here is called an X position. So here's my X, right? And I want to change this from 0, which is what it is now, to 100. I said, Flash, change this guy, this identifier, change its X position to 100. When I run Flash, or when I run the compiler, it runs this code, and it goes, okay, you said to change this thing to 100. So there it is. Now this X point, this registration point, is set at 100. Change it to 200, moves it over to 200. If I copy this and paste it, and I change the X position to the Y position, and I make this 100, and I test my movie, it moved it over 200 along the X and down 100 by the Y. Now remember that this is the point it's talking about. So this is 200 from here to here, and 100 from here to here, because it's moved down. Think about like a graphing situation where you'd have like this point would be graphed as open bracket 200 comma 100, right? Because that would be that point there. Okay, one more property will change, and that will be square 1 dot rotation. And we're going to make rotation. By default, the rotation is 0 because it's not rotated at all. But we're going to rotate it 45 degrees, and I'm going to semicolon that guy right there. And when I test this, it rotates this thing 45 degrees. Okay? Now, notice that these guys, nothing happened to them. Why? Because I'm not targeting them. I'm targeting square 1. If I went and grabbed this line and went paste, paste, and changed this to square 2 and this to square 3, and then I ran it, all of them that's gonna happen to all of them. Okay, because I just targeted 1, 2, and 3, changed the rotation to 45 on each of them, and all of them got changed. Of course, I can change this to 15, I can change this to 75, any number, 75, any number I want. And when I run it, 15, 45, 75. Okay? Super duper. Get rid of that because I actually don't want that. Okay, so I run my movie, or I run my test, and it rotates this guy, square 1, 15 degrees. That's fine. The next thing I want to do is take that code, and I don't want it to happen by default. When I run this thing, I don't want it to do this yet. I want it to do it when I click on this button. Okay, so let's make it really clear that this is a button. I'm going to edit this guy, I'm going to add a new layer, and here I'm going to type button. I'm going to do it in white rather than red. And I'm going to move it over a little bit. Alright, so all of these are buttons. Okay, I run my movie, there's all my buttons, okay? And I want this to cause that movement, okay? That X and the Y and rotation values to be changed. So let's talk about how we do that. First thing I need to do is I need to say, hey Flash, I'm talking about this guy here. So before, when we were talking about this guy, we referred to square 1. Well, what I want to do is I want to refer to this thing. So the way I need to do that for adding a piece of code, typically what you would do is you would write down here, what do we call it? What was it? Called green button 1. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say, hey, green button 1 dot do something. Now the problem is that we don't know something. We don't know what to write here. Now the reason I like Flash is because Flash has this thing, code snippets. Okay, and if you're using this is Adobe Flash CS6. If you're using CC, it'll look like this, but instead of saying code snippets here, it'll actually be like these two things, the greater than and less than sign. Okay, it'll look like that. Okay, so look for a little button here in your actions window that has these two things on it. Okay, so I'm going to open up code snippets, and what you're going to see here there are a bunch of little drop downs here. Okay, there's a ton of little code, and the nice thing about this is I don't have to write any of the syntax. Flash is going to do it for me. I just have to know what a bunch of them do. So I want to open up event handlers for now. An event handler does just that. It handles an event. So the event we're talking about is clicking on a button. So if I click on this button, I want Flash to do something. Well, that's called a click event. If I wanted it to be a mouse over event where I mouse over this button and make something happen, I don't have to click, I just have to mouse over it. Well, that would be a mouse over event. There's a mouse out event, which you can guess what that does. There's a key press event, which means your keyboard. There's an enter frame event, which we'll talk about because that's a bit more complicated. Right now, we care about mouse click events. So I need to, if I double click this, while I have nothing selected, it's going to give me an error. It's going to say this action requires an object to be selected on stage because it needs to tie this code to something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this button here in my stage, and then I'm going to open my code snippets. I'm going to go to mouse click event, double click this thing, and now what happened, let's just I can close this because I'm done with it. Let's make this bigger so you can see what just happened. Alright, so it added all of this code below my original code. Now this code here was just the stuff that was making those changes. I'm going to comment these out. Comments are, here's a comment. Okay, these two slashes will comment out this line. It turns gray and Flash ignores it. Okay, so I can do this and comment out each line one by one, or better than that, I can comment out from beginning to end. Okay, so now what's going to happen is it's going to comment out all of this stuff, and anything I put after that, if I went square 2 dot rotation equals 15, this will still happen because it's not been commented, but none of this will. Watch. I run this, Okay, it did the square 2, but it didn't do square 1 because that's been commented out. Okay, all right, I don't want that, so I'm actually going to delete that. And we're going to scroll down. So this is what we already had. Here's what we just added by doing that mouse click event. Now, again, you'll see there's a comment here. These are instructions. Comments are used in a bunch of ways. One way is to give instructions to a user. So here are the instructions for how to use that mouse click event that we just talked about. I'm going to delete this because I'm going to talk you through it. So I'm going to get rid of these instructions and explain what's happening. I'm also going to get rid of these comments here because I'm going to explain what happens there. And I'm going to get rid of this too. I want to simplify this. Alright, let's make some space here. This is what we care about right now. Just this piece of code. And there are two pieces here. Okay? There is something called the call, and then there's something called the definition. This is the part that's calling a function. So when I write this code, and we'll talk about what it's doing, but this is calling the function, and it's calling this specific function. And this is the definition, and what you'll see is this name here is repeated here because this is where this specific function is defined. And what it's defining is here are the instructions. So in class yesterday, I used the example of having everybody clap their hands once. I put a button on the board and I touched the button, and I said when I touch the button on the board, I want everyone to clap once. Okay? And when I did it, everybody clapped once and we said hooray. Now, what that was I defined a function or a set of instructions. The instructions were clap your hands one time. I defined that function, I gave it a name that made sense, and I called it clap once. Okay, the function was called clap once, and the instructions were clap your hands one time. And then what I wanted to do was every time I touched that button on the board, I wanted you guys to pay attention to me touching the button, and every time I did, you guys would run the function clap once. Okay, I would touch the board, you guys would see me touch it and go, oh cool, St.Romain touched the board, we should do that, run that function clap once. And here is the function. It's defined as these instructions. Not this, I can delete that. Okay, clap your hands one time, and so everyone would. Okay, except we're not clapping our hands, we're running some code. So let's clean this up a little bit. Get rid of that. Now I can name this anything. I can call it Betty. For some reason I keep using that name. Okay, it doesn't matter what this is called. You can call it anything. It makes sense to call it something sensible though, because Betty is not a very good name for a function. So let's think about what this thing is going to do. The green button, when I click on this, it's going to apply some changes to this. So let's call this, instead of calling it Betty, let's instead call it change button, change, what was that thing called? It was called square 1. Okay, change square 1, or maybe apply changes to, you can make it really long if you want to. You can make it apply changes to, doesn't matter what you call it, as long as all of this weird spelling and capitalization, if all of that is the same, copy, paste. As long as it's exactly the same, it'll still work. I'm going to simplify it and I'm going to call it change square 1. Okay? So when I click on green button, okay, I'm saying flash. When I click on green button 1, which is this guy, here's the identifier, green button 1, or GRN, green button 1. Okay, when I click on that, I want you to be paying attention. And pay attention for me to click on this button. When that happens, I want you to run this function. Flash goes, okay, I'll do it. I'll pay attention. So when I run this thing and I go here, when I click on this, I'm not going to do it now, but if I did, Flash would go, oh, I'm supposed to do something. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to, oh yeah, run this function. So then it goes and it looks for the function. Well, here's the definition of the function. This function is called change square 1. And inside these brackets, these curly braces right here, this one and this one, are a set of instructions. These instructions say trace mouse clicked. So I can add any instructions I want here. So for now, I'm going to leave them the way they are, and let's see what happens. I've got, right now it says mouse clicked. When I run this function and I click on the button, what's going to happen is it's going to say, all right, where is this function defined? Okay, it looks for this, it finds it here, and it goes, I'm going to run these instructions. So I click on button, and it traces the words mouse clicked. There they are. Okay, a trace just puts whatever words you said in your output window. And all it does is it tells us that this thing is in fact working. Alright, well let's look at what else I can do. I can change this to anything. I can change this to hello. And now when I run it and I click on the button, it's going to put the word hello in the output window. Okay, anything it does. So there's a little joke for you. Alright, so I click this, it runs the function Adele, and it traces the word hello. Okay, and every time I do it, you can see it's adding to the bottom there, it's adding more hellos. Okay, great. Alright, now I don't actually want it to write hello. I want it to do something else. I'm going to put those names back the way they were. Go back to my code here. Okay, instead of Adele, I'm going to make this change square one again. Copy, paste. Alright, instead of saying hello, I'm going to comment this out. I want it to do something else. What do I want it to do? I want it to do all of this stuff. So let's get rid of this comment code. Let's get rid of that. And I'm going to copy, or I'm actually going to cut this away from here. Okay, and I'm going to stick it in here like this. Format it a bit so it looks a bit neater. Okay. All right. Now what's going to happen is when I click on this button, okay, green button 1, it's going to run this function called change square 1. The function is defined here. There's the name, and these are the instructions in between these curly braces. So it's going to ignore this line because there's a comment there, and then it's going to change square 1 x, square 1 y, and square 1 rotation. So let's run it. Let's see what happens. I click on the button. It applies all those changes, x, y, and rotation of 15 degrees. Okay. Now I click it again. It doesn't do anything. Why? Because it's already done that. It's already set those properties. Okay. So if I wanted to do something different, I could add on my second button here. Say I want to reset those properties. I'm going to open my code snippets. I'm going to add a new mouse event, and this time, get rid of these two. Let's make this bigger so you can see what I'm doing here. All right. This is all applied to green button 1. Let's clean this up a bit here. Oops. Okay, and that's a semicolon, and this is my end curly brace. Okay, and then I'm going to get rid of the instructions because we don't need this. But notice that this is being applied to green button 2. The first time we did it, we added to green button 1, which was this guy here, but this one is green button 2. Okay, so because I clicked on it, I went to my code snippets and I added that code, it adds it to green button 2. Again, it adds a listener, and it's listening for a click, and it adds a generic name. This time I'm going to change it, and following the format I've been using, I'm going to call it change square 1 back. Okay, I'm going to reset the value. So I'm going to say change square 1. This changes square 1. I'm going to change it back to its original. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this guy here. I could call it reset even if I wanted to. You can call it anything. But in fact, let's do that. Let's say reset square 1, probably a better name, and reset square 1. Good. I'm going to get rid of this because I don't need these instructions, and I don't need this instruction. All right. And instead of tracing this, I could do this if I wanted to and make this say reset, but that doesn't do anything. Right? I run this. Okay. I click button 1, it does this thing. I click button 2, and it just says reset down here. Okay. That's not helping me. What I do need to do is I need to change all of these values here back to what they were. So this is going to go back to 0, this is going to go back to 0, and this is going to go back to 0. Now when I run this, this changes it to 200 by 100 with a rotation of 15, and this resets it. Okay? And also I left that trace in there, so it's hitting reset every time I do it. Okay? I'm going to comment that over there, we don't really need that. Great. So now I'm setting and resetting, setting and resetting. And I can do this as many different ways as I want. I can make it, it doesn't have to be 100. I can make this 100. I can make it 100, and I can make this, I don't know, 300 or 30 or whatever. Okay, and rotation is going to be 50. And this time, I set it, and then I set it the second time, it's going to go to 100, which is here, and square one, y is 300, so it goes 100 over, 300 down, and then rotates 50 degrees. Okay, and now it's going to go back and forth between these two positions because one is here and one is there, and all it's going to do is keep on changing. And then if I wanted to, I could actually just grab all of this here, copy, paste, and I'm going to change this to green button 3, and I'm going to say this is going to be reset. Okay, so I should actually rename this, right? Because this will be position 2, position 2, and this will be reset now. Okay, so how about we do this? Why don't we call this position 1, copy, paste. Okay, so position 1 is going to go here, position 2 is going to go to here, and reset, or position 3 is going to go back to default. Okay, run it. Position 1, position 2, reset. Position 2, reset. Position 1, reset. Okay? Sweet. Alright, that's all fine. I'm going to get rid of this trace because I don't need that. You can leave it in if you want to, it doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything problematic. Just be really careful about what you're deleting when you do this sort of thing. So yeah, sometimes I'm selecting this, that would create a problem. Okay, we don't want that. Okay, I can get rid of definition and I can get rid of call. I can also do this. I can take all of my calls and put them all in the same place because it doesn't matter where things are called and defined as long as everything, and this is probably how a programmer would do it. They would put all their functions in one place so that you can find them. Now this doesn't, for our class it doesn't matter, okay? But just recognize that as long as the calls and the functions are separated or are following the right syntax, it doesn't really matter how you do it. I run this, everything's still going to work the same, okay? Great. All right, let's close that. All right, I'm actually going to comment out all this. So we saw what that's doing, right? We're applying that to a button, okay? We're going to do one little change here. I'm going to make a copy of this button, okay, and I'm going to put it here. I'm going to give it a new name called button 4. Okay, I'm going to go down to my actions right here. Does that work? Button 4, yes. Okay, I'm going to go to my actions, and I'm going to create a new call. Okay, and I'm going to say when I press green button 4, it's going to turn. Okay, that's my name of my function. Okay, I'm going to create a new function, and I'm just going to copy all of this, okay, from function to the end of the curly braces, and I'm going to edit it. I'm going to say function turn, capital turn, oops, turn. Okay, turn. I don't need any of this stuff. Actually, I do, because I'm going to set it to, let's call it 150 by 150, and the rotation is going to go to, let's call it 15. Okay, I run that, and this is all doing the same stuff. Okay, this is all the same as it was, and this guy sets it to here at 15. But we're going to make a slight change, because what we're going to do is every time I hit this, it's going to change it to 15 more than it is. By setting it to 15 here, it only sets it to 15 once. But if I change just this equal here to plus equal, it's going to change it to 15 more than it was. Okay, so watch this. This is the same, this is the same, that's reset, that's all good. I go here, and every time I click it, it changes it, rotates it 15 degrees more. Now what do you notice about this? This is not doing what you probably expected, because where is my registration point? Reset that. Reset. My registration point is here. So it's rotating around this top left corner. Okay? What I want to do is I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to this guy here. I'm going to, remember we set this to 0 and 0. I'm going to double click it and edit it. Okay, I'm going to move this here. Okay, and right now it's at 0, 0. This is 91 by 91. So I'm going to go about half, which is 45. That should be minus 45. Minus 45, and that's going to move it over to the left. and I'm going to go minus 45, and that's going to move it up. And now you'll notice that this X, I just repositioned this thing, right? I can do it, I can put it here, it doesn't matter what I do. Okay? It just changes where that registration point is from here. All right, let's do this and see how that works. I'm going to run that, and now what happens is it's rotating around the right corner. Okay, let's do this. Set it back to minus 45 and minus 45. That's going to be centered. Now when I run it, it's going around the center. Okay, so all we did was change the registration point from that top left corner to the center, and everything looks like it is working properly. Okay, all right, try that. See if you can figure it out. There's a little bit of a challenge for you guys to do as well. If you can, take all of that and see if you can make a tutorial, a video graphic that does this, a flash file that does this. Okay, so if you can figure out that, you should be able to figure out this. Maybe. We'll see. Oh, actually, no, you know what? You can't. I forgot to show you one piece of this. Let's go back to here. Right now, I only have one frame. Let's do this. I'm going to comment out all of this, because this is sort of the missing piece for that little challenge. Okay, I'm going to comment out all of my code. So /* all the way to the end. I'm going to go */, and I'm just going to do this. I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to paste it at the end. Square one rotation is going to be plus 15. Okay. And I'm going to move this, to here. When I run this, it changes to 15. Right? That's all it did. Just there's one piece of code that I just grabbed that one piece of code right here, and I said change square one rotation to plus 15. I'm going to do this. I'm going to add an extra keyframe or a frame right here. So function F5. Now what's going to happen is all I've done is originally this was staying on this layer, but now what's going to happen is because I have two frames, it's going to go to the end and loop. And now what will happen is it keeps on rotating. I should probably put those on. Add a frame here. F5. Okay, and now it's just going frame 1, frame 2, frame 1, frame 2, frame 1, frame 2 through this, but every time it comes back to this line of code, it adds 15 to the current rotation. So it just keeps on rotating every time it comes back to that first frame. So you should be able to take that information and use it to create, where'd it go? This. See what you can do. Good luck.